Okay. Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you again for hanging on whilst we had a few technical issues. As you can see from the title, today's webinar is Migrating Single Instance to RAC. It's 360 degrees, so it's about tips, tricks and techniques, and it'll be presented by Saeed Jafar Hussain. As I mentioned, the main presenter today is Saeed Jafar Hussain. He's an Oracle Ace Director. He's also Oracle Magazine Editor's Choice Award 2011 for Technologist of the Year, DBA. He's the Database Support Team Lead at InMabank, and he also blogs at jafar.dba.blogspot.co.uk, so I definitely recommend checking out the blog after this session. As always, I'm James Mercer. I'm the creator and editor of allthingsoracle.com, and I'm the Oracle Tools Product Marketing Manager at Redgate. Before we actually get started with the main part of today's webinar, everybody will be on mute for the duration of the session. If at any time you have issues with your sound, you can't hear us properly, first thing, please check the control panel and check the GoToWebinar audio settings and also your speakers. There will be a full Q&A session at the end, but please feel free to type your questions in the question box as we go along, as Saeed covers topics that are of interest to you, and we'll do our best to answer all of the questions after the main presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and a full recording will be put up on the Redgate website after the session, so it should be up tomorrow afternoon. Okay, so today's agenda, I'm going to have a quick introduction to Redgate software before I hand over to Saeed, who'll go over the main presentation. As I mentioned a minute ago, there will be a Q&A with Saeed after the session. I'll then provide some contact details for both of us and also details about the next webinar. Okay, so I've been running a number of webinars, and it's great to see that there are quite a lot of people that come back each time. But for those of you who haven't attended one of the webinars and haven't heard about Redgate software, I just want to give you a little introduction to us. So we're an Oracle Gold partner. We're based in Cambridge in the UK. We're founded about 13 years ago now, 250 staff. Work in this lovely big open planned office. And one of the things I think that's great about Redgate is everybody here strives to do the best that we possibly can, all the different business functions. And I think this thinking behind doing the best work of our lives is what's led Redgate to be regarded as the gold standard in database development and administration on the SQL Server platform. As you can imagine, all this experience and expertise in SQL Server has led to us to repurpose some of our best-selling and widely used tools for the Oracle platform, and they're all contained within the deployment suite for Oracle. One thing that I really think sets Redgate apart, though, is we have a strong emphasis on education and support. We really value learning here, not just ourselves and the work that we do, but also providing support and valuable learning resources to the wider community and anybody that's involved with the technologies for which we produce tools for. We have a number of websites on the SQL Server side, but on the Oracle side, things like allthingsoracle.com, my regular webinar program, so I'm running a webinar every couple of weeks. We also give away free ebooks, so lots of stuff that I hope is really helping you all to do your job better, and I hope you're learning from these type of initiatives. I won't say any more. I know we're a bit pushed for time now, so I'm going to move straight on to handing over to Saeed for the main part of this presentation. So please bear with us. We've had a few technical issues already, but hopefully this part will go nice and smoothly.
Okay, welcome to the presentation again. Myself, Saeed Jafar Hussain, joining you straight from Saudi Arabia to present this session. And today's presentation is all about migrating single instance to RAC. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about all the existing methods that can be used to carry out your conversion process. I'm also going to give you a demonstration using a couple of methods, and I'm sure at the end of the session you're not only going to have a knowledge about the existing RAC conversion utilities, but also you will know which method best suits or best fits into your requirement. Before I introduce more or further about myself, I would like to start off my presentation asking you a typical question usually that comes into every DBA's mind. What do you think, what are those uphill tasks or challenges a DBA usually confronts while moving from a non-cluster environment to a cluster environment? Not long time before, we used to think about cluster only best suited for those organizations that seems to be very big. Now, starting from a very small business center to a very corporate level company, they want to give every customer uninterrupted service availability. Hence, everybody is going towards the cluster. So you can see cluster is implementing not only in just big organization. You can see from small shops to the big volume of company levels. So now the cluster setup is common in every organization. So being a DBA, you might be working with a non-cluster environment. It would be a little bit difficult for you to migrate from non-cluster to cluster. So as a DBA, there are some challenges that comes across your way that you need to be ready to face up. So I will feel that one of the most other challenging aspect that every DBA who faces while migrating from non-cluster environment to cluster environment is migrating an existing single instance databases to RAC databases. So when you have a non-RAC environment, of course you will be having standalone databases. So your responsibility would be to take these databases to RAC. So you might be thinking, what are those possible ways and methods that are available, and apart from that, what is more important for you as a DBA, which method that best suits your requirement. Sometimes you might be handling a very huge size of database in terms of like terabytes, so it will be very difficult if you are not aware about all those existing methods and tools and tips that can make your process smooth to convert from single instance to RAC. So this presentation is all about discussing those existing methods, and also I'm going to share some of those tips that we have done at our end to improve the performance while we do the conversion process. As I just said, this presentation outlines various procedures that exist to perform an in-place conversion. So I would like to insist on this word, in place. That means my source and target database, they are residing on the same node or on the same database server. Hence, I'm not talking over here about the cross-platform or maybe from Windows to Unix or something, whatever it may be. So it is going to be like in-place conversion. So you are in a single instance database running on a server where your cluster is configured, and you want to make that single instance to RAC. A small bio about myself. Myself, Syed Jafar Hussain. I'm a database support manager at Bank Al Inma in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I have over 20 years of IT experience, including nearly 12 years as an DBA. I'm an AS director and OCM. You can go through this at my website as well. And I also co-authored Oracle Real Application Cluster Essentials. And I have been honored and awarded Technologist of the Year for 2011, Best DBA of the Year. So if you want to see my profile, you can refer January, February 2012 magazine. You can read more about myself. So this is the appendix or the agenda for today's session. I'll be starting off with talking about various conversion methods that exist, and I'm going to demonstrate how you can convert your single instance database to RAC using different methods like Enterprise Manager or Grid Control, you name it, or Database Control Configuration Assistant, and our config utility. And towards the end of the session, I have some experience to share with you. In some cases, you want to test actual conversion without actually doing the conversion process. So this is actually possible. You can do it using the our config utility. So I'm going to demonstrate all these points that I have mentioned here. And also sometimes what if something goes wrong and my conversion process fails, how do I presume from the point I have stopped it or it failed? And also it is always important that you closely watch those logs to see the developments while your process is actually going on. And also and also you see some post-conversion steps, and towards the end of the session I will give you some references. You can refer those references. Before I really talk about this conversion procedure, I presume that you already have a cluster in place up and running, and you have a single instance database on the same node where your cluster is up and running. And also make sure that when you do the conversion process, you need to make sure you are doing it on the same operating system. For example, your source and target database release are the same, and the OS level, everything should remain same. And most importantly, your ASM is up and running. In this presentation, I'm going to show you how a single instance database that was configured on a file system is migrating to RAC on ASM storage. So ensure you have ASM configured, instance is up and running across all your cluster nodes, and also the data this group is already configured and mounted. These are some of the possible methods that you can use to carry out your procedure to convert single instance to RAC. I'm not saying the list is not just limited with what I have mentioned. There could be a couple of other possibilities that you might have known or maybe learned from somewhere else, but I see these methods are most important and useful when you want to do the conversion. You have traditional import export, or maybe you can use data pumps, and of course there is always a standard method, manual method, using which you can carry out this procedure. And also you have grid control, DBCA or config tools which can give you the facility to perform the conversion. And also recently we have delivered a session about how you can do this one online using streams and data pump at Oracle Open World 2010. It's a human general tendency, when you get more options, you get to confuse more. Sometimes you get a lot of options for the same thing, and then you will get confused to choose the right one. You might see that there are too many paths, but you should look for the path which is optimal or maybe best fit into your requirement. So this presentation is all about giving you all those tips and techniques to choose the best method that fits according to your environment. So after this presentation, I'm sure not only you will carry the knowledge about the existing methods, but you're also in a position to pick a right tool to perform your conversion process. In case if you are going to perform in-place conversion, which I said earlier on, for example, your single instance is on the same servers where you have configured the cluster environment and you want to carry out this procedure. So the best tools that you can use are like grid control, database configuration assistant, and our config tool. If you are planning to do Crossplatform, for example, you had non-cluster on a Windows system, and then you will be migrating to cluster on Unix flavor, and you can use export import method or streams and data pumps methods. So you need to distinguish what you are going to perform in place, or you are doing it from some other platform. So I will start my demonstration explaining the procedure step by step using grid control. Most importantly, do not forget to back up your single instance database before you actually start the conversion procedure. It is very important that you back up your database so that if something goes wrong along the way while you are performing the conversion, you should be in a position to recall your database. In this method, I'm going to talk about how you can do your single instance conversion process using the grid control, which is Enterprise Manager. And most importantly, when you decide to do your single instance conversion to RAC, you need to ensure the single instance database up and running on the server. And also, you need to make sure the database is already registered with your grid control. If the database is not listed in the grid control, then you should not be in a position to choose the database when you log into the grid control. So once you make sure that the database is registered with the grid control, what you could do is just log into the Enterprise Manager with your user credentials. Once you log in, go to the target space. Under the target page, select the databases, and when you click the databases tab, you will see the list of databases that are registered under this grid control. So choose the database, single instance database name that you want to start the conversion process. So once you choose the database, and then go to the database instance home page, where you see an option of Change Database tab. Under the Change Database tab, you have Convert to Cluster Database option on the Administration Change Database sections. So there are multiple sections basically. So you go to the Convert to Cluster Database option under the Administration Change Database section. So once you click there, you also need to enter the sys user with sys DBA privilege. So ensure you have your sys user and password with you when you perform this option. And also, after you enter this credential, you go to the Convert to Cluster Database section, where you need to enter the OS level credential. OS level credential is your Oracle user. Typically, Oracle software user is always Oracle user. So you need to have your Oracle user and password and credential enter there. Additionally, you also need to pass ASM sys user and password credential. Why? Because what you are going to do is you are going to convert your single instance database to RAC over ASM. So when you choose this option, you need to provide the ASM user and password credential as well. And under the host screen, you need to choose the host names or database server names, nodes. You can refer it as you want. I would refer as nodes because it's coming under the cluster. For example, I have a single instance database and I want to have a RAC database with multiple instances. For instance, you have like 4 nodes set up currently, and you want to have a single instance database conversion to RAC with multiple instances running on node 1 and node 4. So you need to choose node 1 and node 4 from the list so that the process of conversion will be done on node 1 and node 4. So your instance 1 of this RAC database will be on 1 and second instance will be on node 4. And then on the Convert to Database section, this is the option where you need to specify. For example, you already have a existing listener and the port. Do you really want to go with the existing port and the listener name, or you want to have a different port and different name? So you have an option to choose the existing port or existing listener, or you can create the new one. And then you have a shared storage space. Here you have to mention what type of storage option you are choosing. It's a cluster file system or ASM. In our example, we carry out our demonstration over ASM storage, so you need to pick up the ASM storage option here. And also, if you want to put the database in recovery mode, archive log mode, you need to specify, enter the credential for flash recovery area, mention the disk group name that you want to use for flash recovery area alongside the FRA size. Once you fill all these requirements like storage option, the listener, port, and host details, then go to the Convert to Cluster Database page, review page. It's like just a review page where you can review the options that you have chosen. And then you press Next to start off your procedure. So that was a short introduction about how you can do the single instance conversion to RAC using the grid control. As I said, I don't have the screenshot basically to show you step by step, but what I have tried to do is just give you those points using which you can go sequentially to do this. Now I will show you the same demonstration how you can do your single instance conversion to RAC using the database configuration assistant. I have done like more than 30-40 single instance databases conversion, mostly using DBCA and config tool. So I am more familiar and flexible doing this conversion process with DBCA and config. I prefer these two methods over other methods because as a DBA you have a very less interaction with these options, as most of the action is carried out automatically without much intervention by the DBA. So if you really would like to use any of those options, the best option is to either go with DBCA or config. So this scenario presumes that you have a single database up and running. When you do this conversion procedure, you need to make sure the single instance database is up and running. Do not shut it down. And you also need to understand that anything you do from DBCA, the database name should be registered in the Aura tab file. So before you do the single instance conversion with DBCA, make sure your single instance database name appears in the Aura tab file on the operating system. As usual, you need to have ASM disk groups created and mounted across the nodes where you want to have a RAC database with multiple instances. Using DBCA, conversion process makes very flexible. It's just 2 easy steps. You need to configure a template and then you have to create a RAC database using those pre-configured templates. So first, create a template, database template using the existing database structure and data, and then create a new RAC database using that pre-configured database template. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can do this using the DBCA. What you need to do is, let's assume that your single instance database is up and running and you have a RAC software cluster as well as an RDBMS software. Go to the RDBMS software, navigate to the Oracle home, cluster home, Oracle cluster home, under bin directory, initiate DBCA, and you come across the options like creating RAC database, one node database, and you have Oracle single instance database. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a template from an existing database, which is our single instance database. For that reason, I have to choose Oracle single instance database option from the menu. Otherwise, if you choose the above two options, you're not going to see your single instance database, as these binaries are executed from the RAC home, RAC RDBMS home. So you must choose the option Oracle single instance database in order to see your single instance. And under options screen, you got to choose manage templates. Once you choose manage templates, then you have couple of more options. Okay, I want to create a new database template. So you want to just create a structure only, or you want to have structure with data. So if you want to convert only the database and you want to upload the data later on, you can simply use existing database structure only option. If you want your database to be converted along with the data and structure, choose the other option from an existing database structure as well as data. So I'm going to choose both options, structure as well as data, as I want the entire structure with my data. After that, you will see the database list under this tab, under this drop-down list, database name. So choose the database name, single instance database name basically. So my single instance database name is RACDB over here. So I choose RACDB from the drop-down list. This is why I told you need to make sure the single instance database is registered in the ORA tab file. If it is not registered under the ORA tab file, you will not see the database in this list. Once you choose the database name from the list, some information need to be entered here. Name of the template, also a small description about what is this template all about. So the name of my template is single instance RACDB. I just give some description over here, and by default most of the templates are saved under Oracle Home Assistance DBCA templates directory. So this template will be stored under the given directory. After that, you have two other options: maintain the file location and also convert the file location to use OFA structure. Let me tell you, my demonstration is like I have a single instance database, but my data files are configured over a file system. Now I want to convert my single instance database to RAC over ASM storage. So I choose the second option, as I don't want to keep my RAC database on a file system. I want to have my database to be configured on ASM. So this is the good thing about DBCA. If you have a non-ASM database, single instance database, you can convert the database to RAC over ASM with a single shot. Just the confirmation, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to configure the template. However, I'm going to shut down the database. Are you ready with this? Just say okay to continue. After that, it's going to take some time, and basically the time consumption depends upon the size of the database. It's not like with the options or something, but this is it's related with your size of the database. So once you see 100% progress, it's going to say, do you want to continue with some other option? Do you have something to do? If you want to go, say yes, because we need to create a RAC database. I don't want to exit from the DBCA, so I want to continue creating my RAC database using the existing or just newly created template. So I want to say yes over here to go back to the option, or you can also say no to just exit from the DBCA menu. This is the location where you can see these templates are being created. As I said, it will be under Oracle Home Assistance DBCA templates directory. For example, if you have choose option no in the previous section, so you will be going back to the prompt again, or if you have selected yes, you will be coming back to the welcome screen. Here I am going to create a RAC database, but I will use the RAC database pre-configured single instance database template. So now I am going to use Oracle Real Application Cluster Database, as I want to create a RAC database, and I choose option under Operations page, create database. I am creating a new database, so I choose this option. Basically you see only first three options with your default DBCA. Since we have created a pre-configured database template for our existing single instance database, you see the template name here. So I'm going straight away to single instance RACDB template, as I know this is what made out of my single instance database. So I'm creating a RAC database now using the pre-configured template of my single instance database. So choose the name of the template that you have given earlier on. With 11G Release 2, you have two types of databases: admin managed and policy managed. Policy managed is a new type of database introduced with 11G Release 2, and admin managed is the typical database you used to work earlier releases. But there is a big difference between admin managed and policy managed. Policy managed has its own advantages when you have 4 or more than 4 RAC nodes. So you can read more about policy-based managed databases in Oracle documentation. Anyhow, we are not going to talk about policy-based, policy-managed database. What we are doing is our typical admin-managed database. So enter the RAC database name. You can put the same database name, or you can change your database name. my single instance database name was RAC DB. Now I'm choosing my database name as RDB. And you see here the list of nodes that are running under this cluster. So this is a 3-node cluster. Now I'm going to have a single instance RAC database. A RAC database not necessarily can have 2 or more instances. You can have a single instance database, but it has its own pros and cons. Some people might argue why I am going with single instance. Sometimes you don't have a business critical database and you don't need more than one instance, but it has its advantage. If you have a RAC database with more nodes, you can anytime relocate the instance from one node to another node within 5 minutes time. So for the demonstration purpose, I'm just choosing only one node as I want to create a RAC database with single instance. Of course, you need to enter the sys and system password. So either you use the different passwords for this highly credentialed database default users, or you can use the same administrative password for all above accounts. And my recommendation is always to go with individual passwords and very complex password, of course, as these are very powerful users in the database. And I'm coming back to my storage option here. As I told you in the beginning, my single instance database was configured over a file system. Now I want to move it, my database, RAC database, over ASM storage. So from the storage type drop-down list, I choose ASM storage. And also I told you, make sure the disk group that I'm going to use here is already created at your environment and it's mounted across all the nodes. So I have already created a disk group name called DG RAC DB, and it's mounted on all those 3 nodes that we have seen in the previous screen. Once you are done with this selection, you choose the storage option and mention the disk group. If you are not aware of the disk group, you can simply say browse. When you say browse, you will be going to connect to ASM instance running on that node. Sometimes it might ask you to enter the credential. For the sys user of ASM instance, you need to enter the sys and its password. So once you connect to the instance, it will show you the list of these groups that have been mounted on this instance. So once you enter the required information, press next to continue. So this is what I was talking, like when you say browse, you will see the list of these groups that have created and mounted on this ASM instance. So once you choose your disk group and say next, this is the configuration. Here you can add more redo logs, or you can control the data file size. By default you see the redo log groups, so maybe you can add more redo groups, or you can increase, decrease the redo group. So this is like how you create a normal database using DBCA. The only change is I have already created a single instance database template in order to use it while I create the RAC database. So this is only the difference, otherwise the whole procedure is the same. And then I come to an creation option screen where I have to say okay, create database. And also if you want to have a database creation script stored under Oracle base directory, you can also choose the second option. So you can have the set of commands, database create commands. If you want to refer anytime, you can choose that one, and then press the finish button to proceed it. That's it. So simply you need to just create a template of your existing single instance database, and then followed by create a new RAC database using the pre-existing pre-configured single instance database template. Now we are coming to the third method, which is rconfig. I really like this tool, and it is very easy, and you don't need to do all those what you have done previously like DBCA and grid, where you need more interaction, giving the commands, choosing the options. This is a very simple and straightforward method, and very easiest in comparison with the other methods. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can do the single instance conversion using rconfig tool as a RAC database, maybe two instances. As usual, single instance database must be up and running on the node, and ASM disk groups should be created and mounted on all those ASM instances on the nodes, otherwise you will have an error. Just to give you an overview or brief about our config tool, it was first introduced with 10G release 2. It's a non-interactive command utility. Now, when I say non-interactive means it's not like other utilities like export, data pump or RMAN where you can pass the parameters interactively. It's a command line tool basically, but in a non-interactive mode. So you have to use the tool along with the file. You can use our config not only just to have your normal database conversion, you can also use extensively to convert your e-business single instances database to RAC. So this utility can be used for e-business single instance database as well as your normal databases. Our config executable is comes by default under grid home as well as your Oracle home bin location. So, but however, you always execute our config from your Oracle home directory, not from the Oracle grid. How our config is going to perform the R conversion? There is just a simple file, we call it as XML input file. With the pre-11G release 2, there seems to be only one XML file, convert to rac.xml. However, with 11G release 2, you will find two XML files under the location that I'm going to explain you after a while. So you have convert to RAC admin managed and convert to RAC policy managed. If you could remember earlier on, maybe a few slides before, I talk about Oracle 11G release 2 has two types of databases, policy managed and admin managed. So you have to choose the XML file according to the database that you are going to configure. Are you going to do admin based or policy managed? If you look at the bottom of my screen, I have a rconfig tool, and then I'm using the XML input file. This simply processes. What rconfig is going to do, it is going to just use this input file which has all the information details that you want to perform. Then it simply perform everything for you. Unlike DBCA or data enterprise manager, you don't need to enter much information. You just put little bit information like username, disk group information in the XML file, and just execute the rconfig. So it will take the XML file as input, process, and converts your single instance to RAC. A little bit about rconfig. As I told you, it's a very pretty cool and light, easy to use utility for conversion process, specially meant for conversion process, unlike DBCA where you can create new databases and do other stuff, and also enterprise manager grid control is for different purpose as well. But rconfig tool is specially meant for conversion process from single instance to RAC. It comes by default, no additional configuration steps are required. The good thing about rconfig, you don't need to do any setup. It comes by default, you just use it. It's already ready-made for you. And not much intervention is required from a DBA, which most of the DBAs prefer, that they don't want more control over these things, so leave it to Oracle will perform everything for you. It's a fully automated conversion process. When I say fully automated means the rconfig, while you do the conversion process, it's going to create the threads, required undo table spaces, it's going to change the parameters, also it's going to add the entry in the Oracle cluster registry. So it's going to do everything for you. You don't need to do anything manually, even post RAC conversion. And also it has the ability to migrate from non-ASM to ASM database, so you can do your single instance conversion to RAC. At the same time, you can also take your single instance database from a file system to ASM storage. As I said, I just mentioned, it will create the listener automatically, It will have all the entries in the TNS names, and also register the resources like listener, database, instance, everything with the OCR. And of course, at the end of the conversion process, you see your RAC database up and running. What I actually required for our config prerequisites. Simply, you need to make sure you have a cluster setup in place. Your clusterware is up and running across all your nodes. And also, Oracle RAC database software binaries must be installed. And you have Oracle ASM instance configured and it's running. And of course, the required ASMDs groups. Here is the location for your XML file. It is under Oracle Home Assistance rconfig sample XMLs. So there you will find with 11G release 2 two XML input files, convert to admin managed and policy managed. I'm going to discuss about this is the example and of the file, and after a while we are going to have a walkthrough about the file. Most importantly, there are three parameters, three options that comes within this file. The parameter is convert, verify, has three options basically. This parameter has three options: convert, verify, yes, no, only. When you set this value to yes, what it does is it not only performs the conversion process, it also performs the verification checks. So it will first verify the information that you have entered in the XML file, like the instance names, the Oracle Home, these groups, port and listener, everything, and then it will perform the actual conversion. If you say convert verify is equal to no, it bypasses the prerequisite verification checks and starts the conversion process straight away. What is the use of saying no? For example, you have already tested the prerequisite, so you can bypass this to improve the conversion process time. I mean to say, you can reduce the time that is required for prerequisite checks. And sometimes you are not confident about your RAC environment, disk group and ASM instance. So before you actually do the conversion process, you really want to have a prerequisite checks whether your conversion process will go smoothly or you will see some errors along the way. So the third option is just to test or to verify the prerequisites without actually doing the conversion process. Before you modify this XML file, I strongly advise you to have a backup of these files, as if you change something in this file and something goes wrong, you should be in a position to recall that file. So I always recommend to have a different name and make modification of that copied file. You need to make sure you back up those XML files before you doing any modification over these files. So let's have a walkthrough of the file as I explained. So it's a very simple file. Maybe you hardly find like 50 to around 50 lines, and it is very easy to understand. Here is a walkthrough about this file. The first, on the top of the screen, you see it's only about the introduction, and then you see the first parameter that I want to talk about here is convert, verify. I am choosing option S. So you have three possible options: yes, no, only. So when I say yes, it's going to perform first prerequisite checks and then followed by the actual process. Okay, after I mention this option yes or no or only, then there is a section where you need to put the information about your source database. So when I refer source database, means my single instance database. So so my source database home is my single instance Oracle Home. It could be same as your cluster Oracle database RDBMS home, or it can be a different one. So whatever the DB source home, you need to mention over here. And then you have a target DB home. This target DB home refers to the cluster database Oracle home. So if you have two different Oracle homes for your single instance and for the RAC database, then you have to mention both here. If they are referring to the same, you can enter the same information. Usually you see it is a single Oracle home, as you can create single instance database as well. So here is your source database name, which is RACDB, my single instance database name, followed by the sys user credential. So you need to be a sys user, and then you enter the password for your sys user. This is for your source database, and then you have here the configuration node list. So okay, this is my single instance information. Now I want to configure this database as a RAC database, and I want to have this database configured on those particular nodes. So here you mention the nodes. For example, you want to create the RAC database with 2 instances in a 4-node environment. You mention here your node 1 and node 4. So your one instance will be on node 1 and the another instance will be on node 4. So it's basically depends upon your requirement. As I said earlier on, like I'm going to demonstrate with RAC database conversion on a single instance, on a single node. So I just entered only one instance name here, one node name. So here is the list of my nodes I mentioned. And if you want to have a database service name, you can also mention, otherwise it's not mandatory. And this is the instance preference. The only difference you will find with the single instance and RAC database, all RAC database have one or more than one instances. So all the instance names are identified with the number, instance number 1, 2, 3. So prefixed by the database name. For example, I have a database, RAC database named RACDB. My instance will typically called as RACDB1. And the second instance of this RAC database will be named as RACDB2. So you have a liberty to change the instance names. So here you mention what is the prefix of your instance name. So I put RACDB, or maybe you can say RDB, whatever database name that you decide. So it will be prefixed with the node number 1 or 4 or 3, like that, basically the instance number. And then there is a shared storage type. So as I was telling right from the beginning, this demonstration is going to migrate the database from file system to ASM storage. So I have mentioned that, okay, my storage type is going to be, and then I have a database area where my data files will be configured. So this is my disk group name is DG underscore RACDB. So this group is already created and mounted as a prerequisite. So I have mentioned the disk group name. And if you want to put your database in archive mode and you have a different disk group for your archive log location, you need to mention your flash recovery area here. So just simply you need to enter this amount of information in order to convert your single instance to RAC using our config. So simple. This example what I'm showing here is actually carried out using the Oracle 11.2.02 and ASM storage with HP operating system. So once you modify those contents in the XML file, save it and simply run rconfig with the file. So how I need to execute the file? So run the following command typically as Oracle user. Go to the Oracle home bin location, navigate to this directory and use rconfig utility and give input as the XML file name. So this is the file where I have entered all those credentials for my source, for my target, and what type of storage I'm going to have it, and what are those instances names, and on which nodes it's gonna be configured. So once you enter this command, you need to get relaxed for some time, because everything will be performed by Oracle automatically for you. So it will start up on the screen one after one. You see all this So it first take the backup of your existing database. Basically behind the screen it uses RMAN to backup your database and backup as a copy basically, and it copies the file to the ASM, and then it uses the switch file, switch copy option, where it automatically switches everything to the new location. It's a default or a normal process that we used to do when we want to migrate from one place to another place, but it is done internally for you. So you need to just sit tightly and relax, as everything will be done automatically. You don't have any intervention to do here. Once you enter the credential in the XML file and run the file with the rconfig utility, it will take over everything from your hands and perform. So you see it's adding redo logs, required redo logs, and enabling the threads. These are the few different things between single instance and RAC. In RAC, all the redo groups are identified by threads. So first instance has a thread 1, second instance has thread 2. So it is done automatically for you. You don't need to be worried about all this stuff. So it set up the temporary table spaces, undo table spaces. It creates the trace directories, and also updating the ORATAB file, create a password file for the database, configuring the listener, configuring the CRS services. CRS services means it's going to have a entry in the registry, OCR registry, Oracle Cluster Registry, about your instance listener, so that something goes down, immediately it will be started automatically because of cluster services. So once the conversion process is done, you see operation succeeded. So if there is any error, basically while this process is failed for some reason, you see a result code 1. If you see a result code 1, which means your operation is failed for some purpose. So mostly you see failed conversion process, maybe lack of space in the disk group. So you need to make sure you have sufficient free space in the disk group. For example, if your database is single instance database is about 600 GB, so you need to make sure you have at least 600 GB, minimum of 600 GB disk group created and mounted. So if your disk group is not capable to have the same amount of size that is required for the conversion, then you will see your conversion process is failed. And also, for example, you are going to create a RAC database with 2 instances, and one instance one node has disk group not mounted, then you will see an error. So that's why you need to make sure this group has the sufficient space, free space, and also this disk group is mounted across the ASM instance where you are going to place these as RAC database instances. So once this successfully finish, you can use the command srvctl config database -t and database name. So this command, which is new in 11G release 2, give you the information more about your configuration, like the database name, what is the unique name, what is the Oracle home you have used, what is the where is your SP file is stored, and other options like what type of is database, is it admin managed or policy managed. While rconfig is performing conversion, I would encourage you to go through some of the log files. For example, when you initiate, you can go to the single instance database plus alert log file, where you can see the database is going down for a few times, coming up, and every action that is performed behind the screen in order to convert your single instance. I'm sorry. You can see everything, every action, every bit of action is registered in the alert log and other log files. And this is the alert log for my newly created RAC instance. So once it switched to cluster mode after the conversion, or maybe during the conversion, you can go back to the bdump diagnostic directory in 11G and look for this alert trace. You will see every action is recorded here. Yeah, this is not just to see that what is going on, but this is for your knowledge as well. What is our config is basically doing behind the screen. So it is just a set of commands that you already aware is automated in our config tool. So there is nothing new that is going to be performed in our config. However, if you refer those alert log and some other trace files, you will see the action that is performed by the our config utility. Sometimes, as I told you in the beginning, like you want to perform have a test of RAC conversion actually without actually doing the RAC conversion. Sometimes you are not sure about the conversion process. You want to ensure at least your prerequisites like any sufficient space and this group is mounted across all instances. Your nodes are perfectly fine for the conversion process. You want to perform a test, not actual conversion process. So you can do this one using that convert verify option, as I told you in the beginning. So use that option to perform the test without actually doing the conversion process. So what you all need to do is enter the whole information but change the parameter convert verify to only. So when you mention only value to this parameter, you are going to tell our config, look, I just want to check my configuration. I don't want to actually perform the conversion. So you don't need to be worried because nothing is going to be damaged, as it will only tell you whether prerequisites are met and you can go ahead with the conversion process. So when you do this, you will see, okay, your result code is 0, operation succeed. That means you can without a worry you can go ahead with your conversion process. For example, for any reason you see if the conversion process fails, then it will give you what are those error details. So you have to look up under this error details section. It will give you the reason why your conversion process will fail. Mostly it could be due to the lack of space, due to the lack of permission, or maybe the information that you have entered in the XML file is not correct. Some typing mistake, typo mistake, or maybe password is wrong, or maybe the node is not mounted the disk groups. So this is the good option that is available with rconfig, where you can test your actual conversion without being actually done. So this is one of the good thing that encouraged me to go ahead with rconfig than over the other existing methods. So I have done like more than 2 dozen database conversion process using rconfig, and I did use only option to see sometimes that everything is well and I can continue with my process. Okay, very important and most important I could say, is there any process or anything that I can do to accelerate or speed up my conversion process? Whenever you ask for a downtime to manage or do some maintenance over your database, the business is going to ask you, hey, give me what is the downtime. So this is the important question that raised by the business all the time you do any managed thing, when you do any maintenance things over your database. So imagine if you are going to convert a database, very large database, maybe into terabytes. Is there any parameter that I can say speed is equal to true, so that my process will speed up and it can finish in maybe like if I'm expecting 6 hours, maybe it will finish in 3 hours. Unfortunately, there is no direct option available with rconfig, where you can say, okay, look, I want I want to set the time limit for this process, like, okay, this parameter time limit is equal to 2 hours. No, this option is not available. However, as I have experience of converting a lot of databases from small scale to high scale, so I just noticed that the most significant amount of time has been consumed while taking the backup and restoring the database. And by default, only one channel is allocated for this process. So if you have a database size of terabytes, then with one channel, it's gonna take some considerably long time to back up first, and then same thing to the restore. So what I did, I just applied some degree of parallelism to my RMAN. I configured a parallelism. I'm sorry about this. No. Okay. I have configured parallelism, to say I have configured multiple channels. So I configured like 6 channels. I put parallelism 6 so that, yeah, this is the command, RMAN command, configure device type disk parallelism 6. So what happens when you start your rconfig? So by default Oracle will use 6 channels to back up your database. So it will speed up the process. By doing so, I managed to drop down a database conversion time from 9 hours to 4 hours. So I saved 5 hours doing this with 1 terabyte database power 10G on Solaris operating system. So this is one of the tips that I can give you. This is based on my experience, and also I have read a couple of articles. They did mention about the same thing. So if you are going to handle conversion process of a huge size database, so I recommend you to set this parameter before you actually start your conversion process. What if my conversion process fails during the conversion? For example, I'm using rconfig and I have started, but some reason my conversion process failed. So do I need to clean up everything and resubmit my job? No need. rconfig is smart enough. When you rerun the job, it will clean up the previous things and then it will start over again. So you don't need to worry about these things. However, for example, if the database is already converted and only having issues when it is registering with CRS, you don't need to reperform the same action. Just use service ETL commands to register the database and instance to the required nodes, then that's it. So you need a little bit knowledge and working experience with the cluster to handle this stuff. Otherwise, you can rerun the job at any time. As it explains, it will reperform when you start over, clean up the operations converted before automatically. When the conversion process is going on, you can always refer the single instance database alert, and then when it started doing the RAC conversion, actual conversion, you can go to the RAC database background dump dest location and look this file, RAC database alert log, where you see every action is recorded. It's good for your knowledge as well, and also you know how things are moving forward. And also go to the CFG tools rconfig directory under Oracle base, and there is a log with the date and timestamp. You can always tail the file to see the information, so you will know if something is taking considerable time. You can refer this log if actually the process is continuing or it got halted or stuck for some reasons. So it's very important that you keep a close eye on these log files, just not for only your knowledge, but also to see the process, how it is progressing. I just explained you 3 important methods, very easy to use, like grid control, DBCA, and rconfig, of course, to convert your single instance to database. Now, there are some few post-conversion steps that you need to perform once you convert your single instance database. You need to adjust your SGA for a RAC database at least 15%. For example, if your single instance database had of 1 GB RAM, at least you need to put 15% extra SGA for the RAC database, because it needs some additional memory for RAC stuff and all the things. After that, you can create a database service with load balancing and failover options. This is how we are going to best utilize the RAC database, like load balancing and failover. Once the database is successfully converted, the most important thing that you need to perform is backup the RAC database. So shut down and backup the database immediately. And also sometimes it is very important if you are a RAC administrator, backup your OCR. With 11G release 1 and release 2, you have an option to manually backup your OCR. In 10G, this option was not available as it is backed up automatically every 4 hours. However, in 10G release 2, you can do the logical export of your OCR. With 11G release 2, you can perform the binary backup automatic manual backup anytime. So once everything in place and you feel like okay, you have a RAC database running up and running, you can clean up your single instance details in order to release the space or maybe to release the file system. So here are a few references that you can see. Frequently asked about rconfig, the metalink ID, and also you can go to my blog. I have discussed about these details, and we did some example in our RAC book, RAC Essentials, and the last one is the Oracle documentation where you can refer all this information. So far I try to give you the overview about all existing conversion methods, and also I have tried to explain the best methods that you can use, some tips to accelerate your conversion process, all the stuff. So big thank you for all for listening, and once again really apologize for all the inconvenience that occurred in the beginning due to some technical reasons. Over to you, James.
Hi Saeed, and thank you again for going through the session, and once again thank you everybody for bearing with us at the beginning. I'm really pleased that most people just stay till the end of the session. So without further ado, let's move on to the Q&A session. We've had quite a number of questions that have come in, so I'm going to go through this, and after the Q&A, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be providing contact details for both myself and for Saeed, and also details of the next webinar. Okay, we've got a number of questions already. If you do have some questions, please enter these into the question panel on your control module now. Okay, so the first question, Saeed, is can we use data pump while doing large database cross-platform migration to RAC?
Yeah, of course, you can do that one, and this is one of the methods when you do the cross-platform conversion. But however, if you are going to handle a big database, large database, I would recommend you to go with the cross database conversion instead of data pumps. Data pumps is a bit slower in comparison with the cross database conversion process. So you have table space conversion and database conversion option, so you could go with that one.
Great, thank you, Saeed. The next question is, in what version of grid can we use for this?
You can use grid control 10G or 11G, no problem.
Okay, great.
It basically depends on which version you are going to use. So if you have already 10G and you want to convert 11G, you will have issues. If you have a 10G grid with 11G databases, then it's always going to be a problem. So you need to have 11G version for 11G.
Fantastic. Thank you, Saeed. The next question is revolved around licensing. So how does the licensing work for RAC? The example is our organization has many single instance databases, over 1,000 across many zones. Does the licenses work on a per instance level or per user?
No, this is based on number of nodes.
Okay, so it works out.
It's not about the number of nodes that you are going to use, like how many how many cluster nodes you are going to use, 2 node, 4 node, irrespective of number of instances or database running across. So they will be licensed based on number of nodes, I mean database servers under this cluster. You have a cluster with 4 nodes, so you will be charged for the RAC software for 4 nodes, and of course, and that is also related with the See, here there is a different licensing charges. You will have to pay the licensing for the RAC software and also for the databases, for the Oracle software, which is on CPU based. So you have to pay additionally RAC software license as well. But this is based on number of nodes rather than number of databases or instances.
Great. Thank you, Said. The next question is about size limit. So is there a size limit on a single database to create a template? The example there is if the existing single instance is over 100 gigabytes, could create
I have tried with more than 400 GB or 300 GB, so I never felt any problem. The only constraint is the space requirement, free space requirement. For example, your existing database is about 400 GB and you are going to hold a temporary copy of the same size, so you need to make sure you have double free space and the server is available. This is only the requirement.
Good. Thank you. The next question is, before doing the conversion, does an ASM instance need to be created?
Yeah, this is one of the basic requirement. See, before you go for the conversion process, you must have your cluster up and running. And if you want to use ASM, some customer does not want to use ASM. They want to rather go with the cluster file system. So it's their choice. If they want to go with ASM storage, then ASM instance must be configured and ASM disk groups must be created and mounted across all the nodes.
Thank you, Sai. The next question here, I think you have covered during the presentation, but can you give any further tips about reducing the amount of downtime during converting single instance to RAC? I mean, are there any ways in which downtime can be avoided completely?
Yeah, I have talked about this on one of my slides. So there is no direct option available, unfortunately, with our config or something. However, the only thing is you need to put some amount of degree parallelism in RMAN. The most of the time is consumed for taking the backup. So make your channels to 6. So that's gonna risk you from taking a long time. So I did this one at my premises, and it saved me around 5 hours for 1 terabyte database.
Great, thank you, Zaid. Next question is revolving around if the single instance database is running on one host and the new RAC hosts are different nodes, can grid, DB, CA or RConfig tool be used?
The thing is, as I told you that, it's gonna perform a backup and then it's gonna have a restore. So if you have a storage, if you have a single instance host different than your cluster host, then it's going to be very difficult because these clusters hosts need to have access over this single host. So I don't see that it's gonna be possible. So the only thing is here, what you could do is you can export or you can have a database duplicate over cluster nodes, and then you can perform in-place upgrade, in-place migration.
Thank you, Said. We've got 2 questions here about parallelism, and it's how do you know the degree of parallelism for RMAN 4, 6, or 10?
Basically, by default, it comes with 1 channel parallelism, and usually people will take the backup to tapes, so they might configure multiple channels. But when they use the disk level, usually they don't consider about this. They don't put much concentration over this one. So this is all about the size of the database, and if your database size is too large, maybe you can have, and also it depends upon the the speed of your system, whether it will support that number of channels or not. If you have a single CPU and then you put like 4 channels, then it's always not going to work. So it also proportional to the resource available over the server. So basically it's your call depending upon your resources availability.
Thank you, Said. Continuing on this particular theme, by giving parallelism at RMAN level, are slave processes going to be created across the nodes, or just on the local node where rconfig is started?
Yeah, it's only on the local node, true.
Fantastic. There are a number of questions in here about the slides and the video, and both of these will be made available after the session. So please look out for myself and for Saeed tweeting. Okay, back to another question on ASM. So for a single instance on ASM, do we need to set up new DGs before the migration?
For example, if you are going to use the same ASM for your RAC, you can mention the same name, but what it's going to do is, the only thing what I foresee here is you don't require double space. So it just back up the database and switches. So that's it. You don't need to create a new disk group unless you want to have a new disk group.
Okay. Thank you, Saeed. Interesting question here. Do you have any thoughts on using Golden Gate?
This is what I said. See, whatever examples I have used, like DBCA or grid control or config, they are all done in place migration. Yeah, this what do you call it? Redgate is good. For example, like when you want to have a less downtime, this could be one of the good options. But however, I still doubt about this, because you need to create a RAC database. I mean to say, you need to create the structure of the database, RAC database, and then you have to start moving the data. So it's all about like what you do with the manual upgrade.
Okay.
So I don't see that Redgate is more, sorry, not Redgate, you know.
Golden Gate.
Yeah. Golden Gate. I'm a bit confused about the names.
Thank you. Is there any difference in converting a single instance of RAC just on one node?
This is what I have said. I have did this conversion and the demonstration using the single instance RAC database. So you have no issues. It depends upon your requirement basically. Once you convert the single instance to RAC, you may go with a single instance, and later on you can keep adding as many instances you want. So this is the advantage of RAC database.
Thank you. Another interesting question here: does RAC replace a data guard? Are there any differences? What are the differences between RAC and data guard?
These are the very entire different technologies. RAC is basically for high availability, and then data guard is for something else. This is for like data guard is for just to have disaster recovery database in place. For some reason, if your primary site is gone for some reason, or you have a prolonged downtime with your primary site, maybe you can have data guard in use. And the RAC is like you can have your workload balanced across the database instances. Data guard is a different technology and RAC is a different technology, cannot be seen as one entity.
Thank you, Said. A question again on downtime. I mean, Said, in your opinion, I mean, what kind of time would you factor in for converting a 200 gigabyte non-RAC to RAC?
Again, the question is related to the resource availability. Maybe you have a powerful CPU and a lot of memory, and the data and the servers are less loaded. So there are other factors that contributes to the speedness of your conversion. But however, with 200 GB, I see somewhere like maybe less than an hour or 2 hours.
Fantastic. Yep. I think the important thing there is it will very much depend on the environment.
Exactly.
So a question here, again on ASM, can we copy the files from a normal file system to ASM through CP command on Unix?
With 11G release 2, ASM CMD utility can be done, but you cannot use CP command to do this. However, ASM has its own utility like ASM CMD command line prompt, through which you can do this. but this is available from 11G. And you can have a file, you can copy the file, you can move the file between ASM disk groups using this utility, but you need to log into ASM CMD command line.
Great, thank you. There's a few more questions coming in about downtime, and again, in terms of the actual size of the database that you're moving, a lot of factors will be around your actual environment, but quite an interesting one here about can downtime be reduced by creating a duplicate database first and then using this duplicate database for the conversion.
Can you come again about the question?
So can downtime, any downtime, regardless of the actual size of the database, be reduced by creating a duplicate database first and then using the duplicate database for the conversion? Would you recommend that to help reduce downtime?
No, you cannot use duplicate command, because you are going to migrate your single instance to RAC, so you need to apply some commands, like you need to add cluster based commands like thread number, instance number. You need to have a separate undo table space for each instance. So there is some information, quite a bit information that you need to do. So duplicate target database will not be useful here.
Thank you. Do you have any advice on converting the Oracle EBS to RAC? So just kind of a couple of points to bear in mind.
Yeah, we did it using the rconfig utility, and it was a straightforward method, except that you need to perform some sort of action post-conversion using those ADI utility or something. There is a good note available in the meta link. If you could send me a mail over, so I can send across this information.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if we're unable to answer your question and you would like to ask Saeed anything after this presentation, his contact details will be on the screen soon, so please do contact Saeed through his email, through his blog, or through All Things Oracle when I put the recording up. This question here, Saeed, is does Oracle ship CRS? What are the various options available for CRS?
CRS?
Yep. Does that make sense to you?
No, I didn't quite get this question basically.
Okay. The question was from Vijay Mahawar. So Vijay, if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what you're actually trying to find out. Okay, this question here, so it's quite a long one. So in a particular scenario, if somebody was to have a 1 gigabyte SGA single instance going to 2 nodes RAC, do they need 1.15 gigabyte on each RAC node, or cut the 1 gig in half and add 15% on each node?
That's a good question, interesting question. Yeah, if you're going to have multiple instances and you felt that you're going to have same amount of user load, then you can have one instance like 512 meg and another is 512 meg, provided that 15% extra memory you add for the RAC stuff, for the cache fusion and other stuff. You can manage that one, no issues.
Thank you. And Vijay's just come back, so what he was referring to was what cluster software is shipped with Oracle. So for implementing an Oracle RAC database, is there any software that comes with Oracle? Is there any resources that you can buy that will assist you in managing and doing an upgrade?
With 11G, with 10G release 2, you basically don't require a third-party or vendor clusterware to implement your clusterware, as Oracle has its own version of cluster with 10G release 2. So now it becomes like optional. You can have a OS level cluster and you can build your Oracle clusterware over that one, but it becomes the dependency. So I don't foresee that you really need any other cluster software. Only Oracle clusterware software is enough. With 7G release 2, it was known as cluster ready services. Now they referred as clusterware, and now they call it as a grid infrastructure.
Thank you. We've got another question on downtime. can streams be used to eliminate downtime while converting a single instance to a two-node RAC database?
Yeah, this is what if you could, if you have attended the presentation right from the beginning, there was a slide I talk about the existing various methods where you can perform in place as well as the Crossplatform. There I mentioned about data pump export import and streams with data pumps. So yeah, of course, using streams and data pump, you can reduce the downtime. But again, there is a lot of other work involved. It's not very easy like what you do with the rconfig. You need some amount of work to be done before you configure this. So as I told you that last year's Oracle Open World presentation, myself and Tariq Farooq, we did a presentation about how you can do your online conversion using the streams and data pump. So I can send across the presentation if you could send me the email.
Fantastic. There are a couple more questions about ASM, but I feel that we've covered quite a lot of that in the Q&A and also during the presentation. So Saeed, I mean, are there any resources that you could direct people to find out more about ASM?
They want to know more about ASM or what?
Yes. But I think we have covered quite a lot through the presentation and through the Q&A. So I just wondered whether you knew of any resources, or are there any articles on your blog in which would help people understand ASM a little bit more?
Yeah, there is a very good book written by a couple of people over Oracle ASM, Automatic Storage Management. I think they can buy this book, or if they have any questions or concerns about ASM, they can always write to me. I try to explain and give them the explanation. But what we have covered in this is just the conversion process. We did not mention, or we didn't go very deep down to the ASM level. We just said that we need to have an ASM instance running across the nodes with the required disk groups. We didn't quite talk about ASM technologies, but if they do need information, please ask them to write a mail to me. Maybe I can explain them whatever they ask.
Great, thank you. And we've just got time for one more question. Again, Saeed's contact details will be available on screen in a moment. So if you do have any further questions, you can direct these to him, or you can also add them as comments on where I post a video on all things Oracle. This is quite an interesting one. So Saeed, you recently tweeted about DataGuard. So do you have any thoughts on DataGuard in general, and what are you doing these days? And any resources that you know that people can access to find out a little bit more about DataGuard?
I'm a bit busy with a couple of other projects, like we are migrating our existing RAC nodes from HP Superdome 1 to Superdome 2. At the same time, we are doing the storage migration, like we are going from ECM DMX4 to VMAX storage, and parallelly we have DataGuard, of course, going on, and I did configure a RAC database DataGuard using DataGuard utility. That's going well, but I don't prepare any presentation yet on this, as we have more than 50-60 databases to do the same action. So I'm not quite getting the time to prepare the presentation, but I'm hopeful that one day I will have a presentation and deliver through the Redgate.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's all we have time for with the Q&A session. As you can see on the screen now, there are contact details for Saeed Jafar Hussain and for myself. So we've got an email address here. Twitter, please follow Saeed and myself on Twitter at @SJafarHussain and at All Things Oracle. It'd be great if you're on LinkedIn, to connect with us. We very much like to connect with people on LinkedIn. So again, our addresses are there. So before we finish today, there will be another webinar on the 11th of April. I'm trying to bring 2 webinars per month, both for DBAs, for developers, across a lot of Oracle subjects. So I hope you have learned a lot today, and I hope you will join us on the 11th of April, which is a webinar on the Oracle Cost-Based Optimizer. This is presented by a member of the Oak Table Network, Randolph Geese, and you can register and find out a little more about all of our webinars at redgate.com/oracle-webinars. Thank you once again to everybody for joining us. Thank you to Saeed, as always. It's a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for presenting today.
Thank you very much for having me here today, Redgate and James, and look forward to seeing you in another session.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Saeed. Goodbye. And goodbye, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us, and I hope you all have a nice day or a nice evening. Thank you once again.